Let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Thanks so much for joining us, Ambassador. I want to actually just start off with what we just heard James Longman saying there, that this is just hysteria kicked up by the West. Is that what this is?
Well, Lindsay, the world can see with our own eyes. Anybody can see the forces that the Russians have mounted, have arrayed around Ukraine on three and a half borders. 150,000 troops. This is a major force, and we can see it. They've not tried to hide it, and so to say that the West is whipping up this crisis is, of course, ludicrous. No one outside of Russia takes that seriously. The other point is on NATO. I mean, NATO is a defensive alliance. It has been energized by the Russians, almost ironically, because Russia is now a threat. Russia is now seen to be a threat. The Finns, the Swedes are considering asking to join NATO, not just Ukraine and others. So this sense of insecurity and this threat is clearly coming from Russia, and NATO is trying to protect its members and responding.
I just want to follow up on one other thing you said, because you said no one outside of Russia takes that seriously, the idea of this hysteria that's being whipped up by the West. But in Ukraine, it seems like at least that's also the same sentiment that they're saying, kind of nothing to see here. We've talked to Stephanie Ramos, Terry Moran, Ian Pannell, who all have been on the ground and are on the ground there in Ukraine now, and they describe life going on as usual, that people are going to school and pubs and eating and shopping. And so do you buy that in Ukraine they don't feel that this war is imminent?
I don't. I thought your reporter did a very good job of describing that under the surface there is anxiety. Under the surface of going to school and going to pubs, there's real concern. There are people that are leaving, heading for Poland, heading for other places. There are self-defense forces that are being trained and organized. The military is on high alert, and it is getting more and more capable. So I think it's a balance. I think you're right that it's been recently that President Zelensky has raised the level of concern. President Zelensky has a hard job. He, on the one hand, doesn't want his people to be panicked. He wants Ukraine to be strong. And they can be strong if they're not panicked. So he needs to project a calm attitude and a resolute, firm attitude, not blinking at President Putin's challenge and his bluster.
And you came on the show on Friday to discuss the likelihood of a Russian invasion. I want to ask you now, after the events of this weekend and today, do you think that Russians will invade? And if they do, when?
Hard question to answer. I will try it again. That I think the odds is the only way I can kind of answer this. The odds are a little bit against an invasion. Not a lot. Again, 55-45 against an invasion. And I say that because the costs of an invasion on Russia, on President Putin, even on his regime. Your reporter also said that in Russia, there are a lot of people who don't want to see Russia invading its neighbor. So there are high costs to President Putin. So I think the odds are a little bit against an invasion. And your question about when, if my 45% obtains, it could be any time. Okay. I am impressed with the interest in negotiations. Those could take some time. Negotiations take a while to both ripen and to come to some conclusion. So that could give us some time to approach this problem in a more rational way.
And today, White House officials said again that they don't think that Putin has made a decision on whether or not to invade. Do you buy that? Do you think that he's on the fence about whether or not he's going to attack?
Actually, I do. And the reason that's important is if he hasn't yet decided, which I think he hasn't, I hope he hasn't, then he can be deterred. And the deterrence comes from the sanctions, from the strength of the Ukrainian military, the number of Russian soldiers who will die and go back to be buried in their villages and towns, possibly destabilizing his regime. The costs are very high, as I say. So I think that is something that's on his mind.
Do you think that it's a dangerous precedent, this idea now that we're talking about maybe negotiating with Putin? If we are to give, does this say, oh, okay, anytime that I think that I want to get something, I'll just stage a war?
This is a very good question, Lindsay, and you're right about the precedent. But I don't think it's a problem to sit down and negotiate on certain things, maintaining our principles. You know, we have a strong principle, and it's the respect for sovereignty, in particular Ukraine's sovereignty, but also others. I mean, we talked about the Finns and the Swedes who might be interested in applying. So there are principles that we have to defend. But to sit down and negotiate some arms control agreements or some confidence building measures with NATO and Russia that will benefit both sides, that's okay. I don't see that as a concession if we are sticking to our principles and coming out of those negotiations better off, even if the Russians are better off as well.
Ambassador, we just have about 30 seconds left, but why should Americans care? We've been talking about this. There are a lot of people who are sitting at home on their couch like, why should I be invested in what happens a world away?
Lindsay, it's a very good question, and those people are right to ask this question. One way to think about it, the way I think about it, is Ukraine's on the front line. The Russians have started a war that the Ukrainians didn't want. The Ukrainians didn't start this war. The Russians started, and the Russians don't stop with Ukraine. The Russians interfere in Ukrainian elections, and then they interfere in our elections. So the Russians are fighting a war in this instance against Ukraine, and they're on the front line. Lindsay, just like we support our soldiers that are on the front line, we should support Ukraine. It's on the front line of this war that the Russians are fighting against us too.
Ambassador Taylor, could talk to you all night. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's good to be here.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.